What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astrodfs, bringing you a brand new video. Today's video going over the Monday night showdown between Philly and Tampa. If you guys are looking for the Buffalo and Pittsburgh, unfortunately going to have you guys go back to the last video where I broke them down in the 3-game slate, just because that had the featured slate for the most part. It had the Millie Makers, more of the double ups and stuff like that. The 2-game slates have some contests, but they're not as good. So unfortunately, we have that. So the Showdown has the Millie Maker, the big double up, stuff like that. So if you guys want to see the 2-game slate and get the Pittsburgh Buffalo breakdown, sort of, check that video out. Have that. Granted, prices are going to be different, but as far as players, I'm still going to try to help you guys out. Obviously, the prices are going to be different for the Showdown and regular contests, so I'll try to help you guys break that down. And yeah, so before we get into it, guys, I just want to go over, not that, but this, my lineup yesterday, right? So this is the double lineup, only 229 entries, so a small contest, and what it came down to was simple, right? So I had the good Jared Goff, right? Lowest scoring quarterback on the slate, unfortunately, to go with his cheap price as well. But, played Aaron Jones, very high owned on this one. Tony Pollard, still decently owned. Demarcus Robinson, Amon-Ra, CD, all these guys very highly owned. But where I went wrong was playing Tyler Higbee Jamison in Detroit defense, right? Playing CD Lamb at his price point, Amon-Ra at his price point, versus getting some of the Rams in there like Puka. But the biggest factor, if you didn't have, right, we go and look at these lineups, looking for the cash lineups. A lot of these lineups are pretty similar or close. If you did not have Jake Ferguson, you did not cash, right? 60% owned in this contest, and this is a smaller contest, right? This was the most they had for just the Sunday because it was supposed to be a 3-game slate instead of a 2, so they put what they could in there. Usually it's around $2K and above for the $25, but like I said, I'm not trying to make excuses, but yeah, if you didn't have Jake Ferguson, you didn't cash. It was pretty hard to, based off of ownership. Goff didn't kill you, if you went Gibbs instead of Pollard, right, didn't kill you. Did not matter, like, pretty much who you went. A lot of people had Green Bay's defense, I believe more than half the field. 51 had 13, so you're talking about 50 points out of Ferguson and Packers, which was very highly owned, and if you had them, you had that advantage, right? You had that huge advantage. I did not have either one, right? I got 2 points from the combined Higbee and Lions versus Ferguson and Packers were 50, so that is what killed me, not going Ferguson. So Higbee really didn't even play. Sucks to see. We move on. Like I said, it was a 2-game slate. It was supposed to be 3, kind of changes stuff, but I'm over it, right? I am over that. So let's get into the reason you guys are here, the Showdown. So Jalen Hurts without his top weapon, A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts, dislocated finger, most expensive player on the slate. Now, I do think it's a good matchup for Jalen Hurts and that offense, right? The good thing is we saw these two teams play earlier in the season. The bad news is a lot of times that doesn't replicate, right? 25-11. Philly's defense was a lot better. Tampa's defense was a lot better too. Now they're not there, right? And now we don't have A.J. Brown. This is the first time Jalen Hurts has been without, I believe, both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. He's had them basically both. I don't mean that Devontae Smith is out, but first time he hasn't had both of them. They've been a healthy wide receiver duo, so very interesting to see how that pans out. But I believe for the rushing upside, Jalen Hurts is there. Obviously, the red zone tush-push gets hurt against the Giants, played very poorly. And has, for the most part, played pretty poorly. If it wasn't for a lot of this, the tush pushes saving them, a lot of these games would be ugly, right? Plays against Arizona, 3 touchdowns, 167. Giants, 300 yards. But just hasn't played good since San Fran said, hey, like, gave you guys the key on how to stop Hurts. It seems like a lot of teams have have figured that out. And they're on the road, right? Look at Jalen Hurts' away stats. 210 yards, 8 touchdowns, 10 picks. Just go and look lately, right? Seattle 23, Dallas 9. The Giants, I guess you can count that one, right? Kansas City hasn't had a really explosive game since Washington, but it's a good game for him. AJ Brown being out is challenging. Fully agree with that. I think there's a way you could play this slate without Jalen Hurts. I don't recommend it though. It is pretty hard to get him and some of these other players, but I don't think it's all that necessary, right? Obviously, he is going to get the most points, but for his price point, is it worth it, right? AJ Brown being out kind of helps it because you don't have to pay basically half your salary for that stack, especially if you look at captain. You don't have to pay that stack, but it's very tough, right? So Mike Evans, though, 10-6 going against Philly. I love it. I love Mike Evans here in this matchup, playoff game for him. Darius Slay back. The interesting thing is Philly looks like they might be without both of their starting safeties, so that's a huge blow to that aspect of already a team that's played very poorly in the corner position. Mike Evans at 10-6. Go back and look at his game against Philly in week 3, 5 for 16, a touchdown, 17 points. So not every game is going to be the same, especially you could have two of the same teams play each other, right? Like this is almost what I mean, right? The Giants and Eagles play each other. Jalen Hurts, 300 yards, touchdown, running. And if you watch that game against the Giants, they just did not look good at all, right? And Giants get a big win, Jalen Hurts gets out. But there was a huge difference. So that's within 2 weeks. This is, 15, 16 weeks later, they're playing each other again. Different team. Like even Rashard White looking at it, right? Week 3 against Philly, 14 for 38, 3 for 24 in the receiving game and a fumble, 8.2 points. You look at Rashard White lately, those numbers are there, right? I think being used in the receiving game is going to be a huge benefit for Rashard White's price point. With Baker Mayfield kind of questionable with the leg injury, I believe it is, rib injury, combination. Like Baker Mayfield is banged up, which is a huge concern. So I'm looking at Rashard White getting a lot of volume in the run and receiving game at his price point. So it's very hard to do if you want to play Hurts to play both Mike Evans and Rashard White on this slate. You pretty much have to do a toss-up. You could always pay down for Chris Godwin instead of Mike Evans at Godwin's price point, and Godwin's been having some really solid games lately. You look at week 3, 3 for 32, only 8.2 DK points. But that's a decision you're going to have to make on the slate, right? I'm going to give an example towards the end. I'll just make a line and see what we can come up with. But breaking it down, right, Baker and Jalen Hurts are both hurt in their own aspects. Jalen Hurts has got a dislocated middle finger on his right hand. Could play a huge factor without A.J. Brown. Baker Mayfield, leg/rib, having some discomfort easily is the best way to describe it. Two things you have to take into consideration. You have to also take into consideration how poorly both defenses have been, especially in the pass game. How poor these defenses have been. So Baker Mayfield, I do like at his price point. I don't love, though, right? He's cheaper than most quarterbacks in these showdowns with this kind of matchup. You look at him in week 3 against Philly. 146 yards, touchdown and a pick, only 11 DK points. Even the splits don't favor Baker. He's honestly, if you look at it, better on the road, but does seem to pass more almost in home games, or at least more efficient. But going down, and this is where we start to get guys I really like, right? Devontae Smith, 8,600 against Tampa. Without A.J. Brown, he's going to be a guy they rely upon quite a bit. Obviously, Tampa knows that A.J. Brown's out. Like, Devontae Smith is their best receiver in this game. If I'm Tampa Bay, that's something I'm looking at, right? Of slowing down Devontae Smith. Do I think you need Devontae Smith if you're playing Philly? No, right? I think you can get away with Hurts and a pass catcher. And if you want to go the Tampa Bay side, yeah. So who am I talking about in that aspect? We'll get to that in a second. I like Devontae Smith. I see a scenario where Tampa realizes that they're going to make other wide receivers for Philly step up, right? Julio Jones, Watkins, Zach. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I mess it up every time. Every time I try to pronounce it, I mess it up. So we're just going to call him OZ, I guess. Not to disrespect his name. So, Chris Godwin, I mentioned. I do like Chris Godwin as well. I like both there's some more pass catchers, but I like Tampa's offensive side, except for one player, pretty much, for Tampa. DeAndre Swift, I don't like on this slate. Reason being, he missed last week, right? Against Arizona, 13 for 61, not a bad game. Before that, against the Giants, 20 for 92. But you look at his points as of late, they're not there. They're not where at first, right? Week 1, I was like, they get DeAndre Swift and don't use him. And then week 2, against Minnesota, has that big game. And then, plays some consistency at the running back position. But as of late, has not been there. Has not been the same. The volume is pretty consistent for the most part for him. But what worries me is Kenneth Gainwell's volume that he is getting as well. So I think avoiding Philly running backs is almost the way to go. Got a hair? Jesus. It's almost the way to go. But Dallas Goedert, I think, is a name that really stands out to me as of right now looking at this, right? Going against Tampa, who, you could see on DraftKings, 31st against tight ends. Looking at his game against Tampa Bay, 5 for 41, so only 9.1 points. But you got to remember A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are both in that one as well. I'm just saying Dallas Goedert just seems like a really solid option here at his price point. Just seems like a huge value for me. Going, like I mentioned, Jalen Hurts. Like, you could play Jalen Hurts at his price point, and you can play Dallas Goedert at his price point. And that's not bad. That's $8K. You still have to get a captain in there. But that's not as bad as you would think it would be with getting the most expensive guy and what could be his best pass catcher. So, Dallas Goedert, really good play in my opinion this week. Cade Otton, a lot of people are kind of liking Cade Otton. I'm going to avoid it, right? You look at Cade Otton's season, 3 games, over 10 DK points. Only had one real true tight end game, which was against Houston, 6 for 70 and 2 touchdowns. But, look at the yardage. The yardage hasn't one game above 50. Like, he doesn't get enough targets. He doesn't get enough red zone looks for me to love Cade Otton. Granted, he's cheaper, but I'd want him around the 4 to high 3K range. I don't like him at 5,400. I'd rather go kickers than go Cade Otton and take that upside, right? We look at Jake Elliott, one of the better kickers in the league, especially from distance. We've seen some distance kicks, but why I like Jake Elliott, you go back and look at week 3, 3 field goal attempts for him, 2 extra points, 11 DK points. Tampa's got a really, really good red zone defense. They make it difficult for teams to score. And Philly's been pretty good in the red zone, but if you take away a lot of their tush-push runs, they're not as good as they seem. So I like Elliott in that aspect. McLaughlin, we saw Tampa struggle lately in Carolina, in New Orleans. Doesn't get any points there. That's just because they were a huge deficit. But Tampa's got a terrible red zone offense. If you go and look at the percentages for them, Philly's defense kind of mid-tier in the red zone. So I really like both kickers in this slate. If you want to save $200, you can go McLaughlin. I like Jake Elliott. I think he's a guy that gets it done for Philly. Gets some opportunities in this one. I mentioned Kenneth Gainwell. We go and look at Kenneth Gainwell lately. 6 for 41, 7 for 62. and gotten some receiving work lately. So I think trying to pick a running back is just too difficult. If you want to save salary, go Gainwell. If you want kind of more volume, go Swift. So take that in. Chase Edmonds, I think, is worth noting of the volume he's received lately. 10 for 25, 3 for 16, but 6 targets, 40, 4 for 27 in a reception. So he's been getting some volume. I still think it's Rachaad White. I do think if White, for whatever reason, gets a little banged up, then yeah, they're going to go Edmonds. But I would rely on Tampa to be run heavy almost. Same for Philly for that aspect with Hurts' banged up finger to get a lot of rushes. But in the end, this could be a game where one team is driving the ball down the field, getting some points, and the other team's got to catch up. This could also be a game where both offenses are struggling, and this turns into a defensive game that we really haven't seen before with these two defenses besides the last time they played each other. So running backs could be used. It might not be the best game, especially for Philly's run game. Tampa's got a really good run defense, especially against running backs in particular than quarterbacks. But yeah, I like Tampa's defense at 4K here. It's tough for me for how poor they've been, but this is probably the healthiest Tampa's defense has been lately. Look at the last 2 out of 3 games. Above 15 points against Jacksonville and above 15 points against Carolina. 2 different teams. One, I'd say a fairly good offense. The other one, the worst offense in the league. And now they get one of the more high-scoring offenses in the league who've just underperformed in the pass game. With A.J. Brown out, I do like Tampa's defense. I think they're very playable. It's the same thing for Eagles defense at $3,400, a $600 pay down. Like I mentioned, the thing that concerns me is how banged up their secondary is, though. Obviously, they get Darius Slay back, but having 2 of their starting safeties is a huge hit to that defense there. So, name to throw out in between is Julio Jones at $3,800. Doesn't really hit the value, still above 3K, but I think it is worth mentioning. He'll probably see more of the outside role if I had to guess. Watkins and Jones would kind of split it. OZ is going to be the slot guy there. That would be my guess of what Philly's going to do as far as A.J. Brown being out, but Quez Watkins, no, I don't. You could go and say, hey, look, he went 8 for 93 and a touchdown last week against the Giants, but Marcus Mariota was the quarterback, and they pretty much took everybody out. So I'm not playing Quez Watkins. I'll take my shot on Julio or OZ as 2 better catching wide receivers than Quez Watkins. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I will take getting burnt by Quez Watkins any day of the week. Trey Palmer, though, is an interesting name at $2,800. Here's the reason why. One, he's under 3K, which is a value piece for me. I like that under 3K price. It allows me to pay up. To put it in perspective, we play 28 here. That bumps us up to $600 per player, or way more than $600. Sorry, I can't count. $1,100 per player. So I think getting a player under 3K is a good way of staying in cash if you hit your buy-ups, pretty much, is the best way to say it. So Trey Palmer at $2,800, I'm looking at, is going to see Maddox, who is the worst corner that Philly's going to have. Like I mentioned, with the safeties being out, having the best matchup for Tampa Bay at his price point, he doesn't need to do a lot at his price point, but if he gets us a game like we saw in Week 17, take away the touchdown, right? 11.4 points, or against Jacksonville, 4 for 42 at $2,800, which is where he's been. I'm loving that outcome. It allows me to get, if he gets anywhere above, 6-7 points, that's a huge hit for us. So, I mentioned OZ, I like. Boston Scott, I'm not looking at. Rashard Penny, I imagine one of these 2 running backs is not going to be active. I would imagine. They pretty much have done that with Swift being in, Gainwell being in. Maybe if A.J. Brown's out, they go another running back or another tight end, but I would imagine that's who they go to. And that's pretty much it, right? There's not a whole lot other names. The only other name that I would throw out and it's not even a love here, is Devin Tompkins, though. Just because we've had a game early in the season against New Orleans, 4 for 45 and a touchdown. You know, maybe if a Tampa wide receiver gets hurt, but that would be it, right? I think Trey Palmer is kind of the cheapest guy to go down to, or OZ. One of those two guys is probably the cheapest you're going to. David Moore is another name to throw out there. Just getting, 1 to 2 targets, but I would just prefer Tompkins over Moore. Not any real injuries that we're looking for. Baker's going to play. I can't see a scenario where he's not. Other than that, everyone is in. So let's get to an example lineup, right? And go from there. So I mentioned I like Trey Palmer. I mentioned I like Dallas Goedert. That puts us at 10-2 already. I like where we're at. This is where it gets difficult. So let's see what happens if we put Hurts in. It puts us at that. I'm going to put White in my lineup. And it puts us at 66. So what if we go Mike Evans? And we're getting three Tampa players without Baker Mayfield. We're getting 2 pass catchers and a running back without Baker. I don't love that. So let's go Baker, and we're left with 3,400. We can only go Eagles defense. I don't love it, so let's clear it. All right, so we got Trey Palmer. We want Dallas Goedert. We want our value guys. I'm gonna throw Mike Evans in as captain. Can we get Jalen Hurts? We can. We got 6,600. So if we get White, we're left with 3,100, and that still doesn't bring us where we want to be. We're fading guys. I'm okay with fading in Baker, Devontae, Godwin. We got these guys. We're left with 3,100, and I don't love it, right? I don't want to put Dallas Goedert as my captain either at his price point. I think there's just higher upside than that. And I don't have a kicker, and I really want a kicker, and that's what's bothering me. So let's get Evans out of there. I don't think we save any money by flipping it. I think it's still pretty much 33. So yeah, we're not there. We're kind of far away from getting that. So for the sake of the video, let's do this, right? I don't love this, but for the sake of the video, let's put Dallas Goedert as our captain, just so we could see what we have, what that kind of allows us to do. If we throw in Trey Palmer, 52, and we get Elliott. I don't have Baker, but I'm okay with that. I'm okay with how that line looks. I don't love it, but I'm okay with it. So, hope you guys did enjoy the video. Like I said, if you guys want that Pittsburgh, Buffalo breakdown, go check out the last video. I go over it. And thank you guys again for the support that I continue to get, especially towards this playoff run. Getting a lot of support, so I appreciate it, guys. And I will see you in the next one.